Greetings everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today's topic is A Day in the Life of a Tramp by George Orwell. So let's get into the presentation. And before that, those who haven't subscribed, do subscribe for more updates. Well, who is this George Orwell? So Eric Arthur Blair was known by his pen name George Orwell. He was an English novelist, essayist, journalist, and critic. His works were characterized by lucid prose, social criticism, and opposition to totalitarianism. He was born in India and raised and educated in England. After school, he became an imperial policeman in Burma. Later, he began his writing career as George Orwell, a name inspired by a favorite location, the River Orwell. Well, who is a tramp? As Orwell comments, he is a native English species. He is a wanderer living on charity. He roams around on foot every day, says Orwell. He crosses England from end to end in his wanderings. Of course, a tramp has no job, family, or home. He has no possessions in the world apart from his rags. He lives at the expense of the community. The age of a tramp ranges from 16 to 70, and there are around 2 women for every 50 tramps, confirms Orwell. So, what do you think about the tramp population? There are actually 100,000 of tramps found in England and Wales. So, this was essentially due to bad unemployment status of England. The tramp does not wander for his own amusement, says Orwell, or because he has inherited the nomadic instincts of his ancestor. He is just wandering or roaming about here and there to avoid starvation due to death. Well, now let's see about the workhouses that were allocated for the survival of the tramps. So the tramp is unemployed because of the degraded English economy. So the tramps must exist too, isn't it? So he must have to be helped by either public or private charity. The authorities have therefore created asiles or workhouses, or sometimes they call it as spikes, where these destitutes can find food and shelter. So, what are these spikes? A spike was referred to a workhouse or a public shelter for the homeless where food and boardings were supplied, just barely, right? So, no one can stay in any so called spike or workhouse more than once in a month. The workhouse places are about 20 kilometers apart. They must seek a new resting place every night. Well, so what do you think a day in a life of a tramp would look like? Or what do you think about his routine? A tramp comes out of the spike at about 10 in the morning, about 20 kilometers from the next workhouse, and definitely he has to walk around. And it will probably take 5 hours to walk that distance. And a tramp will never rest much on the way because the police look on tramps with a suspicious eye. So somehow he has to continue walking to prevent these atrocities from the police. He will arrive at his destination at about 3 in the afternoon, and the spike does not open until 6 in the evening. So here, these wandering tramps have to wait for 3 weary hours for the spike to be opened. So he spends his time in the company of other tramps who are already waiting. So we could see that the herd of human beings in the name of tramps roam around the spikes and they look haggard, unshaven, filthy, and tattered. So you could find that soon there will be around hundreds of unemployed men representing every trade. They are sheer victims of the unemployment in England, which was known as one of the richest countries in the world, says Orwell. So that is going to be a long wait because the tramps wait lying on the grass or squatting in the dust. They talk to each other about their adventures without much hope of finding any work on the way. They smoke outside the spikes because smoking is prohibited inside. So they smoke the cigarette ends, which they actually pick up in the street. And the tramps are also prohibited to beg, so no to begging. And here you could see that the spikes are mistaken for a prison. Especially these spikes are built in some distant suburbs, and they might be very easily mistaken for a prison because everything is ugly and sinister in a spike, and it gives you an exact prison atmosphere. You could also see that uniformed officials bully the tramps and remind these tramps that in coming into the workhouse or into the spike, they have given up all their rights and all their freedom. So the tramp's name and trade are written in the register as soon as they enter. He is made to have a bath, and his clothes and personal possessions are taken away. Then he is given a coarse cotton workhouse shirt for the night stay. And in case of money, if a tramp has more than 2 francs, he will not be allowed into the spike and will have to find a bed somewhere else. Even money less than 2 francs will be confiscated and, of course, returned the next day. And the tramps who have more than 2 francs hide their money in the toes of their boots and they make sure they are not observed, for this fraud could be punished with imprisonment. So they have to be very careful. And now let's see something about the tramps' food and shelter. And when it comes to their supper, they are supplied with half a pound of bread with a little margarine and half-liter of tea. The bread is terrible. They look grey and they are always stale and they have a disagreeable taste. Even the tea is bad, but the tramps drink it gladly as it warms and comforts them after their tedious journey. After this unappetizing meal, the tramps are sent to their cells. Actually, you could find that there is no light in the cells, only a narrow barred window very high up in the wall. And you could also see a spy hole in the door because the guards keep them to keep an eye on the inmates. So the tramps have to sleep on the floor with only 3 blankets for bedding. And often they sleep without pillows. The room is terribly cold, and as a result of long use, the blankets have become almost thin, that they offer no protection at all against the severe cool climate of England. The doors are firmly bolted on the outside, and they are not to be opened until 7 o'clock next morning. Right? So it is more or less as a prison, isn't it? So here you could find the difficulties of being a tramp. They are present for nearly 12 hours night, and only a cotton shirt and 3 thin blankets they were offered, isn't it? So the place is also bug infected, and these tramps fall a prey to vermin. So obviously they experience sleepless nights amidst these horrible difficulties. And the next day you could see that they experience a doctor's visit too. Usually the doctors arrive late. The tramps will not be released until this formality is completed. The tramps actually they line up in queue half naked. Many of them are found to have congenital malformations, and they suffer from hernias and wear trusses. And their deformed feet are covered in sores as a result of a lengthy tramping in ill-fitting boots. The old men are nothing but skin and bones. So the doctors check them in haste, as it is only a formal ritual. The authorities are actually not at all bothered about their health unless they are infected by infectious diseases like smallpox. So now let's have a look into the tramps' clothing. They wear rag clothes which are actually begged from others on their way, and they are actually fit only for the dustbin. These cloths are grotesque, ill fitting, too long, too short, or sometimes too big or too small, and their strangeness would make you laugh. They do not have socks, and as Orwell comments, they slide their bare feet into boots whose leather are actually hardened by sun and rain and has lost all the suppleness. So the tramps receive their breakfast after dressing up identical to the previous night's supper. Yes, obviously the same stale bread. Well, so you could also see that the tramps are made to do some work there. The gods set them to work. Some tramps are asked to wash the floor, and some others chop the wood, and some even break coal, and others do a variety of jobs until 10 o'clock. Given back any personal property confiscated, sometimes a few francs, which were confiscated the previous evening. And half a pound of bread and a piece of cheese are given for the midday meal. Sometimes even a ticket is offered, which can be exchanged at certain specified cafes along the way for bread and tea to the value of 3 francs. And they are sent out after 10 in the morning. Well, so here what you have to note is they have a completely insufficient diet. So a tramp consumes around 750 grams of bread, a little margarine and cheese, and a pinch of tea every day. So this is an insufficient diet for a man who covers 20 kilometers a day on foot. So sometimes a tramp begs or steals for other needs. Of course, obviously they have other needs also. And sometimes what happens is they get imprisoned, as begging is against the law in England. So, as Orwell states, it is a vicious circle. If he does not beg, he dies of starvation. If he begs, he is breaking the law, right? So they lead a degrading and demoralizing lifestyle. The only pleasure for tramps is coming by a few shillings unexpectedly. This gives them the chance to eat their fill for once or to go on a drinking spree, says Orwell. And again, as he says, finally the tramp who has not committed any crime and who is, when all is said and done, simply a victim of unemployment, is condemned to live more wretchedly than the West criminal. He is a slave with a semblance of liberty, which is worse than the most cruel slavery. Here we could see that Orwell is completely shattered by these pathetic survivals of tramps in one of the richest countries of the world, England. Well, so hope you'd have understood the concept of this particular essay. And thank you for watching. Those who haven't subscribed yet, do subscribe and get more updates. And this is Wahida signing off.